Cyrus the Great, the benevolent conqueror. If there was ever a ruler in ancient history who knew how to win both battles and hearts, it was Cyrus the Great. Born around 600 BCE in the rugged highlands of Persia, modern-day Iran, Cyrus started as the unlikely heir to a small kingdom, but ended up building one of the largest and most tolerant empires the world had ever seen. Unlike many conquerors who ruled through fear, Cyrus believed in respecting the cultures and religions of the people he conquered, a philosophy that made him not just a great king, but a legend. Cyrus's rise to power began with the Medes, a powerful empire that ruled over Persia at the time. According to some accounts, Cyrus was actually the grandson of the Median king Astyages, who feared a prophecy that his grandson would overthrow him. In a classic ancient world move, Astyages ordered the baby Cyrus to be killed, but the shepherd tasked with the job took pity and raised him as his own. Years later, when Cyrus learned of his true lineage, he led a Persian revolt against the Medes, and won. By 550 BCE, he had united the Medes and Persians under his rule, creating the foundation of the Achaemenid Empire. What set Cyrus apart wasn't just his military skill, but his clever diplomacy. Instead of crushing defeated enemies, he often treated them with respect, earning their loyalty. When he turned his attention to the mighty Lydian Empire in modern-day Turkey, its king, Croesus, was confident of victory. But Cyrus outmaneuvered him, capturing Sardis, the Lydian capital. Instead of executing Croesus, as most victors would have done, he spared him and even kept him as an advisor. This kind of mercy was rare in the ancient world, and it made Cyrus's enemies far more willing to submit to him. His most famous act of benevolence came in 539 BCE, when he conquered Babylon. The city, ruled by the unpopular King Nabonidus, surrendered without much resistance. Cyrus then did something revolutionary. He issued the Cyrus Cylinder, often called the first Declaration of Human Rights. Written in cuneiform, it promised freedom for enslaved peoples, including the Jews, who had been exiled in Babylon for decades. Cyrus allowed them to return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple, an act so significant that he's even praised in the Hebrew Bible. Unlike later conquerors who forced their culture on others, Cyrus embraced diversity. He let conquered nations keep their traditions, languages, and religions as long as they remained loyal to Persia. His empire stretched from the Aegean Sea to the Indus River, yet it functioned smoothly thanks to efficient administration, a network of roads, and a fair system of taxation. He even created one of history's first postal systems, proving he wasn't just a warrior, he was a brilliant organizer. Cyrus's death, like his life, became the stuff of legend. Some say he died in battle against nomadic tribes in Central Asia, while others claim he passed away peacefully in his capital, Pasargadae. His tomb, a simple but imposing stone structure, still stands in Iran today, a testament to a ruler who was as humble as he was powerful. What makes Cyrus truly remarkable is how he's remembered. The Greeks, who usually had little love for Persian kings, admired him. The Jews honored him as a liberator. Even his enemies respected him. In a world where empires were usually built on brutality, Cyrus showed that greatness could also come from wisdom, tolerance, and respect. More than 2,500 years later, his legacy lives on. Not just in history books, but as a model of how leadership can be both strong and compassionate. Cyrus the Great wasn't just a conqueror, he was a visionary who proved that the best way to rule an empire wasn't by force alone, but by fairness and humanity. And that's why, even today, he stands as one of history's most extraordinary leaders, Alexander the Great, the legendary conqueror. Alexander the Great is one of history's most famous figures, a young, ambitious king who conquered vast lands and left a legacy that still fascinates us today. Born in 356 BCE in the Kingdom of Macedon, Alexander was the son of King Philip II and Queen Olympias. From an early age, he was groomed for greatness, tutored by none other than the philosopher Aristotle, who instilled in him a love for learning, science, and culture. But Alexander wasn't just a scholar. He was a fierce warrior with dreams that stretched far beyond the borders of his homeland. By the time he was 20, Alexander's father was assassinated, and he inherited the throne. Unlike many young rulers who might have struggled to hold on to power, Alexander acted swiftly. He crushed rebellions, secured his position, and then set his sights on an audacious goal: conquering the mighty Persian Empire, the greatest power of the time. In 334 BCE, he crossed the Hellespont, modern-day Dardanelles, with around 40,000 soldiers, marking the beginning of one of history's most incredible military campaigns. What followed was a series of stunning victories. At the Battle of Granicus, Alexander led a daring cavalry charge that shattered the Persian defenses. Next came the Battle of Issus, where he faced King Darius III himself. Despite being outnumbered, Alexander's tactical genius won the day, forcing Darius to flee. But Alexander wasn't satisfied with just defeating Persia's armies. He wanted to conquer its heart. He marched into Egypt, where he was welcomed as a liberator and declared a pharaoh. There, he founded the city of Alexandria, which would become a center of learning and culture for centuries. The decisive moment came at the Battle of Gaugamela in 331 BCE. Once again, Darius assembled a massive force, but Alexander's brilliant strategy and the discipline of his troops led to a crushing victory. Darius fled again, only to be killed by his own men, leaving Alexander as the undisputed ruler of Persia. But instead of destroying Persian culture, Alexander adopted many of its customs, marrying a Persian princess, Roxana, and encouraging his soldiers to take Persian wives. This policy of blending Greek and Persian traditions showed his vision of a united empire. Alexander's ambition didn't stop there. He pushed further east into modern-day Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India, facing harsh terrain, fierce resistance, and his own soldiers' exhaustion. At the Battle of the Hydaspes River, he defeated King Porus in a hard-fought battle, but his troops, worn out after years of campaigning, refused to go further. Reluctantly, Alexander turned back. By 323 BCE, he was in Babylon, planning new conquests, perhaps Arabia or even the Western Mediterranean. But fate had other plans. At just 32 years old, Alexander fell ill, possibly from malaria, poisoning, or another disease, and died within days. His sudden death left his empire without a clear successor, and it soon fractured into warring factions ruled by his former generals. Despite his empire's collapse, Alexander's impact was lasting. He spread Greek culture across 3 continents, influencing art, architecture, and thought for centuries. Cities he founded became major centers of trade and learning. His military strategies are still studied today, and perhaps most importantly, he became a legend, a symbol of ambition, courage, and the relentless pursuit of greatness. Alexander the Great's story is more than just a tale of conquest. It's about a man who dared to dream bigger than anyone else of his time. Whether admired for his brilliance or critiqued for his ruthlessness, one thing is certain: the world would never be the same after him. Alfred the Great, the king who saved England. Alfred the Great isn't just another name in the history books. He's the king who literally saved England from falling apart. Born in 849 as the youngest son of King Athelwulf of Wessex, Alfred wasn't originally destined to be king. But fate had other plans. By the time he took the throne in 871, England was a mess. Viking invasions were tearing the country apart, and most Anglo-Saxon kingdoms had already fallen. Wessex was the last one standing, and Alfred was the guy who had to defend it. Now, Alfred didn't start off as the Great. In fact, his first few years as king were rough. The Vikings, led by fearsome warriors like Guthrum, were relentless. They'd raid, burn villages, and disappear before anyone could stop them. Alfred lost battles early on, and even had to hide in the marshes of Somerset at one point. Legend says that while hiding, he famously burned some poor woman's cakes because he was too distracted thinking about how to save his kingdom. Not his finest moment, but hey, stress makes us all do weird things. But Alfred wasn't one to give up. He regrouped, built a better army, and came up with a genius strategy. Fortified towns, called boors, where people could take shelter during attacks. He also created a navy to fight the Vikings at sea, earning him the title Father of the English Navy. In 878, he won a decisive victory at the Battle of Edington, forcing Guthrum to surrender and even convert to Christianity. This wasn't just a military win, it was a turning point. Alfred and Guthrum later signed a treaty that divided England, giving the Vikings control of the north and east, an area called the Danelaw, while Alfred kept Wessex and the hope of a united England alive. What makes Alfred really stand out, though, isn't just his military smarts, it's his love for learning and law. At a time when most kings were more concerned with fighting than reading, Alfred believed education was key to a strong kingdom. He translated Latin books into Old English so more people could read them, encouraged scholars to teach, and even set up schools. He also reformed the legal system, blending old customs with new ideas to make things fairer. By the time Alfred died in 899, he'd laid the foundation for a united England. His son and grandsons would eventually take back the Danelaw, creating the England we know today. But it all started with Alfred, the underdog king who refused to let his kingdom die. He wasn't just a warrior, he was a thinker, a reformer, and a leader who truly earned his title. Alfred the Great. So next time you think about great leaders in history, don't forget the guy who hid in a swamp, burned some cakes, and still managed to change the course of a nation. Not bad for a youngest son who was never supposed to be king. The Lion of Punjab. The story of Maharaja Ranjit Singh. In the early 19th century, when much of India was under British rule or fragmented into small, warring states, one man rose to unite the fierce and proud land of Punjab under his visionary leadership. His name was Maharaja Ranjit Singh, often called Sheri Punjab, the Lion of Punjab. Born in 1780 in Gujranwala, now in Pakistan, Ranjit Singh wasn't just a king. He was a warrior, a diplomat, and a ruler who earned the love of his people through fairness, courage, and an unshakable spirit. Ranjit Singh's story begins in chaos. Punjab was divided among several Misls, Sikh clans, each fighting for power. His father, Maha Singh, was a leader of the Sukher Chakia Misl, but he died when Ranjit was just a boy. At the tender age of 12, Ranjit Singh took charge, showing early signs of his brilliance in leadership. Despite losing one eye to smallpox as a child, his vision for a united Punjab was clearer than anyone else's. By the time he was 19, Ranjit Singh had already captured Lahore, the heart of Punjab, in 1799. Unlike many conquerors, he didn't rule with tyranny. Instead, he won the respect of Muslims, Hindus, and Sikhs alike by ensuring religious freedom and justice for all. He restored the Mughal-era Badshahi Mosque, which had been damaged, and even funded Hindu temples. His court was a mix of diverse cultures. His prime minister, Dhyan Singh, was a Dogra Hindu, and his foreign minister, Fakir Azizuddin, was a Muslim. Ranjit Singh wasn't just a peacemaker. He was a military genius. He transformed the Khalsa army into one of the most formidable forces in India. With the help of European generals like Jean-François Allard and Jean-Baptiste Ventura, he modernized his troops, introducing advanced artillery and disciplined infantry. His legendary Fauj-e-Khas, Special Brigade, was trained in Western warfare tactics, making Punjab a power to reckon with. What's fascinating is how he handled the British. At a time when the East India Company was swallowing up Indian kingdoms, Ranjit Singh cleverly maintained Punjab's independence. He signed the Treaty of Amritsar, 1809, with the British, securing his borders and focusing on expanding his empire towards the northwest. His kingdom stretched from the Khyber Pass to the Sutlej River, including parts of modern-day Pakistan and Afghanistan. But Ranjit Singh wasn't just about war and politics. He was a patron of art, culture, and architecture. The Golden Temple in Amritsar was beautified under his rule, and he donated tons of gold to cover its domes, giving it the shimmering glory we see today. His love for luxury was well known. His court was full of poets, musicians, and exquisite treasures, including the famous Koh-i-Noor diamond, which later ended up in British hands. Despite his power, Ranjit Singh remained humble. He refused to sit on a throne, preferring to sit on the floor like his soldiers. He ate simple food, wore plain clothes, and always led from the front in battles. His people adored him because he was one of them, a true king who ruled with his heart. Sadly, even lions grow old. In his later years, Ranjit Singh's health declined, and after his death in 1839, his empire slowly crumbled due to infighting among his successors. Just a decade later, the British annexed Punjab. But his legacy lived on. He proved that a secular, strong, and united Punjab was possible, and his name became a symbol of pride for Sikhs and Punjabis everywhere. Maharaja Ranjit Singh wasn't just a ruler, he was a legend. His story reminds us that true leadership isn't about force alone, It's about wisdom, respect, and the courage to stand for what's right. Even today, the Lion of Punjab's roar echoes in history, inspiring generations to come. Frederick the Great, the enlightened warrior king. If you were to imagine an 18th century ruler who was equal parts philosopher, military genius, and eccentric art lover, you'd probably picture Frederick the Great of Prussia. Born in 1712, he wasn't exactly the kind of prince his father, the stern and militaristic King Frederick William I, had hoped for. The young Frederick preferred playing the flute, reading French poetry, and debating Enlightenment ideas over drilling soldiers, much to his father's fury. Their relationship was so explosive that at one point, Frederick even tried to flee Prussia as a teenager. The attempt failed, and his punishment was brutal. He was forced to watch as his best friend and possible lover was executed. Yet somehow, this troubled prince would grow up to become one of Europe's most brilliant and unconventional kings. When Frederick finally took the throne in 1740, Prussia was a small, rigidly disciplined kingdom with a powerful army but little cultural influence. That changed almost immediately. Instead of sticking to his father's austere ways, Frederick embraced the Enlightenment, inviting philosophers like Voltaire to his court, though their friendship would later turn into a famously bitter feud. He abolished torture, expanded education, and promoted religious tolerance, declaring, "Every man must go to heaven in his own way." At the same time, he poured money into the arts, architecture, and music, transforming Berlin into a city of intellectual and artistic energy. But Frederick wasn't just a bookish dreamer. He was also a military mastermind. Within months of becoming king, he shocked Europe by invading Silesia, a wealthy province belonging to Austria. This bold move kicked off the War of Austrian Succession, and against all odds, Frederick's well-trained Prussian troops won. Austria tried to take Silesia back in the 7 Years' War, 1756 to 1763, a conflict that dragged in nearly every major European power. Prussia was surrounded, outnumbered, and on the brink of collapse multiple times. Yet Frederick, through sheer tactical brilliance and relentless determination, pulled off miracle victories at battles like Rossbach and Leuthen. His ability to inspire his men, fighting alongside them, sharing their hardships, earned him the nickname Old Fritz and legendary status among soldiers. By the time the wars ended, Prussia was battered but victorious, and Frederick had secured his reputation as one of history's greatest generals. Yet the man himself was a bundle of contradictions. He wore ragged uniforms, hated court ceremonies, and preferred the company of his dogs. He adored his Italian greyhounds to most humans. He ruled as an absolute monarch, but saw himself as the first servant of the state, working tirelessly to improve Prussia's economy, infrastructure, and legal system. He expanded Prussia's territories while writing essays on ethics and playing flute sonatas in his spare time. In his later years, Frederick became more isolated, growing cynical and cranky, yet he never stopped working. When he died in 1786, he left behind a Prussia that was no longer a minor German state, but a rising European power. His legacy? A king who proved that a ruler could be both a fierce warrior and a thinker, a disciplinarian and a patron of the arts. Napoleon, no stranger to greatness himself, would later visit Frederick's tomb and say, "If he were alive today, I would not be here." Frederick the Great's story isn't just about battles and borders. It's about a man who refused to be defined by one thing. He was a soldier who loved poetry, a dictator who believed in reason, and a king who, for all his flaws, shaped history in ways few could have imagined when he was that rebellious young prince running from his father's shadow. Augustus Caesar, the man who invented Imperial Rome. Picture this. You're an 18-year-old kid who just found out your great-uncle, the most powerful man in Rome, has been stabbed to death by his own senators. Oh, and in his will, he named you as his heir. That's exactly how Gaius Octavius, soon to be known as Augustus, found himself thrust onto history's stage in 44 BCE. What followed was one of the most brilliant political transformations in history, as this unassuming teenager outmaneuvered every rival to become Rome's first emperor, turning a dying republic into an empire that would last for centuries. Born in 63 BCE, Octavian, as he was first called, was small, sickly, and bookish, not exactly the image of a future warlord. But Julius Caesar's assassination changed everything. While older, more experienced men scrambled for power, Octavian played the long game. He quietly built alliances, raised armies, and positioned himself as Caesar's rightful successor. First, he teamed up with Mark Antony and Lepidus to crush Caesar's killers in a bloody proscription that left the Mediterranean stained with blood. But once the dust settled, the alliance crumbled. What followed was a decade of intrigue, propaganda wars, and finally open conflict, with Octavian proving himself the master of them all. The showdown came at the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE, where Octavian's fleet defeated Antony and Cleopatra's forces. When the lovers later committed suicide, Octavian stood unchallenged. But here's where he showed his real genius. Instead of declaring himself dictator like Caesar had, a move that got him stabbed 23 times, Octavian pretended to restore the Republic. He took the humble title Princeps, first citizen, and claimed he was just another senator, just one who happened to control the army, the treasury, and foreign policy. With a mix of charm, threats, and political theater, he convinced Romans that he wasn't a king, even though everyone knew he absolutely was. Augustus, the majestic new name he adopted, then spent 40 years rebuilding Rome, literally and figuratively. He famously boasted, "I found Rome a city of bricks and left it a city of marble." Grand temples, aqueducts, and roads sprang up across the empire. He created Rome's first police force, fire brigade, and civil service. He even instituted history's first public pension system for soldiers. But beneath the shiny surface, Augustus ruled with an iron grip. He exiled poets like Ovid for writing scandalous verses, purged political opponents under the guise of moral reform, and ensured no rival could threaten his power. His personal life was messier than his polished image suggested. He forced his daughter Julia into political marriages, then banished her for adultery when she became an embarrassment. His preferred heirs kept dying young, leaving him to eventually settle on his stepson Tiberius, a gloomy general who hated the job. When Augustus died in 14 CE at age 75, rumors spread he'd quipped to friends, "Have I played my part well? Then applaud as I exit." The standing ovation never ended. Augustus didn't just rule Rome, he reinvented what Rome was. The empire he designed lasted in the West for another 100 years, and his name became a title, Caesar, used by emperors for millennia. From the Tsars of Russia to the Kaisers of Germany, rulers would echo his legacy. Not bad for a sickly teenager who started with nothing but a famous name and a killer instinct for survival. Augustus proved that real power isn't about crowns or thrones, it's about making people believe you deserve to rule. He was the original master of spin, a dictator who convinced the world he was a servant of tradition, and in doing so, he became the gold standard for every clever autocrat who followed.